Chapter 1. The Perfect Lie. Nathaniel Nate Brenner had always believed his life was built on solid ground. At 52, he had amassed a modest fortune through his custom furniture business, which had begun in his garage 25 years ago and grown into a respected brand with 3 showrooms across the state. His hands, calloused and strong, were a testament to his dedication, a man who believed that anything worth having was worth building yourself. His colonial-style home in Oak Ridge Heights stood as a monument to his success. For bedrooms, a workshop out back, and a sprawling backyard where he'd taught his children to play catch. It was also where he'd proposed to Victoria, Vicky, under the maple tree that now cast shadows across their bedroom window each morning. That morning, June 15th, Nate woke with a strange feeling in his gut. Something felt off, though he couldn't place it. Vicky's side of the bed was already empty, the sheets cold. Unusual for a Saturday. "Happy birthday to me," he muttered to himself, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. 55 years old today. Not old, but not young either. He'd noticed more gray in his beard lately, more creases around his eyes when he smiled. Downstairs, the house was oddly quiet. He expected to smell coffee, hear the weekend news playing softly in the living room. Instead, nothing. A note on the refrigerator caught his eye. "Getting things ready for tonight. Back soon. V." Right. The birthday dinner. Vicky had insisted on throwing him a party this year. Nothing extravagant, she'd promised. Just family and a few close friends. Nate had reluctantly agreed, never one for being the center of attention. He spent the morning in his workshop, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of sanding and staining. The cherrywood console table was a commission for a long-time client, but Nate had been adding special details, inlaid maple leaves along the edges, as a personal touch. His phone buzzed with birthday wishes from vendors and old friends, but nothing from his children. Alexander, 27, worked at a law firm in the city. Olivia, 24, had graduated from college last year and moved back home temporarily while starting her graphic design career. By late afternoon, Nate had showered and changed into the new blue button-down shirt Vicky had left on their bed. A gift, he presumed. The house was now alive with activity. Vicky directing caterers, Olivia arranging flowers, and Alex, surprisingly home early from the city, setting up a bar on the patio. "There he is," Vicky called, crossing the room to kiss him on the cheek. At 51, she still turned heads with her blonde hair and infectious laugh. "Happy birthday, honey. Everything's almost ready." Nate noticed the slight stiffness in her embrace, the way her eyes didn't quite meet his. He'd sensed a distance growing between them over the past year. Empty nest syndrome, they joked, though Olivia had moved back in. But it felt deeper than that. By 7, their backyard was filled with familiar faces. Sam Westfield, Nate's oldest friend and fishing buddy, clapped him on the back and handed him a glass of bourbon. Diana Winters, their neighbor who had watched the kids grow up, brought her famous pecan pie. Even Howard Fulton, the retired detective who had become a regular at Nate's showroom, chatting about woodworking techniques, made an appearance. "Speech," someone called after dinner, as Vicky disappeared into the house. Nate reluctantly stood, bourbon in hand. "Thanks for coming, everyone. You know I'm not one for big celebrations, but..." The sliding glass door opened, and Vicky emerged carrying a cake with lit candles. Behind her came Alex and Olivia, both looking solemn. Too solemn for a birthday celebration. "Before you blow out the candles," Vicky said, her voice steady but cold, "we have something for you." Alex stepped forward, manila envelope in hand. "Dad, we've been planning this for a while now. It's time." The backyard fell silent. Nate took the envelope, confused. Inside were papers, legal documents, divorce papers, and beneath them, an eviction notice. "What the hell is this?" he asked, looking up at his family. They stood together, a united front against him. "We're selling the house," Alex said, his law school confidence on full display. "Mom gets 70%. Olivia and I split the rest. And you get nothing," Olivia added, her voice trembling slightly, but her eyes hard. "The business stays with Mom. It's all outlined in the prenup revision you signed last year." Nate's mind raced. The insurance paperwork Vicky had asked him to sign during tax season. He'd trusted her, hadn't even read it. "You've been so busy with your precious furniture that you never noticed what was happening right under your nose," Vicky said, setting down the cake. "We've outgrown you, Nate." The guests shifted uncomfortably. Some began to leave quietly, embarrassed to witness such a private humiliation. "Happy birthday, loser," Alex sneered, and Nate felt his heart crack at the contempt in his son's eyes. The three of them, his family, his world, exchanged smug glances and actually laughed. Nate looked at the papers, then at the faces of his wife and children. 29 years of marriage. A lifetime of memories. All a lie. With steady hands, he pulled a pen from his pocket. He signed the papers, one after another, his signature as flawless as it was on the custom furniture warranties he prided himself on. "Fine," he said simply, handing the papers back to Alex. Then he turned and walked into the house, up the stairs, to pack what remained of his life. Chapter 2. Ashes and Embers. The roadway in on Highway 16 became Nate's home for the next 3 days. A generic room with faded wallpaper and a mattress that had seen better days. He sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, scrolling through decades of family photos. Birthdays, Christmases, graduations. Had it all been a performance? Nate wasn't a man who cried easily, but alone in that room, the weight of betrayal crushed down on him until tears came. Not sad tears, angry ones. White-hot and corrosive. On the 4th day, he rented a storage unit for his tools and personal belongings, then checked out of the motel. His next stop was Westridge Bank, where he withdrew $30,000 in cash, his emergency fund, kept separate from the joint accounts. "Planning a vacation, Mr. Brenner?" the teller asked pleasantly. "Something like that," Nate replied. A fresh start. That afternoon, he purchased a used Ford F-150 with cash and loaded it with his essential tools. By nightfall, he was crossing the state line, heading west. No destination in mind, just away. Away from the hollow shell that had been his life. 300 miles later, he pulled into a roadside motel and finally checked his phone. 27 missed calls. 15 voicemails. Dozens of text messages. All from Sam, Diana, and a few other friends. None from his family. He listened to Sam's first message. "Nate, what the hell happened? Call me. Everyone's talking. Vicky's saying you had some kind of breakdown," and took off. Nate deleted it without listening to the rest. Let them wonder. Let them talk. He found a bar down the street from the motel, a dim, anonymous place where no one knew his name or his shame. 2 whiskeys in, a woman with tired eyes slid onto the stool beside him. "You look like you've had one hell of a day," she said. "One hell of a life," Nate corrected, raising his glass. Her name was Marissa Calloway, a freelance photographer passing through on assignment. They talked until closing time, about everything except what had brought him there. She didn't pry, and he appreciated that. "Where are you headed?" she asked as they walked back toward the motel. "I don't know yet," Nate admitted. "Somewhere I can start over." "I know a place," Marissa said. "Little town called Riverstone, about 3 hours north. Good people. Simple living. And they could use a skilled woodworker." 2 days later, Nate drove into Riverstone, population 4,862. A former mill town turned artisanal hub, nestled between mountains and a winding river. Marissa had given him the name of a friend who owned rental properties. By sundown, Nate had secured a small cabin on the outskirts of town and a lead on workshop space. A week passed, then another. Nate established a simple routine: coffee at dawn, work on small projects to rebuild his portfolio, evening walks along the river. He changed his phone number, but kept his old one active, forwarding to a voicemail that he checked periodically. The messages from Victoria and the kids began soon enough, confusion turning to frustration, then anger, then something that almost sounded like concern. "Dad, where are you? Mom's freaking out. The business is suffering without you. Call me back. Nate, this isn't funny anymore. We need to discuss the divorce settlement. My lawyer can't proceed without your input. Daddy? It's Olivia. Please come home. I'm sorry about what happened. We just thought. Please call me." Nate saved each message but returned none of the calls. Let them stew in the uncertainty. Let them feel a fraction of the disorientation he'd experienced. In Riverstone, he began to heal, or at least to bandage the wound. He rented a small storefront on Main Street and hung a simple sign: Brenner Custom Woodworking. He built pieces on commission, smaller than his previous work, but with the same attention to detail. Word spread quickly in the small community. One evening, as he was closing up shop, a tall man in a tailored suit entered. "Mr. Brenner?" "Henry Blackwood." I've heard good things about your work. Blackwood owned a chain of boutique hotels across 3 states and wanted to discuss custom furniture for a new property. It would be Nate's biggest opportunity since starting over. I need to see the space first, Nate said cautiously. Of course. The property's about 4 hours from here. Would next weekend work? As Blackwood left, Nate felt something stir within him. Not just professional interest, but the first ember of a plan beginning to glow. That night, he opened his laptop and did something he'd resisted for weeks. He searched for news from home. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. The local business journal had a feature on Victoria Brenner, now sole owner of Brenner Furniture Designs, and her exciting new direction for the company. The photo showed Victoria at a gallery opening, champagne in hand, beaming at the camera. Beside her stood Lawrence Donovan, described as the company's new creative director. Nate recognized him immediately, a furniture designer from Chicago whom they'd met at a trade show 2 years ago. Lawrence's hand rested comfortably on Victoria's lower back, a gesture too intimate for mere colleagues. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. Not just a betrayal, but a calculated takeover. Victoria and Lawrence, plotting together. The children, bought off with promises of inheritance. Nate, the obstacle to be removed. He closed the laptop and walked to the window, staring out at the moonlit river. The ember in his chest was now a steady flame. So that's how it is, he murmured to himself. That's how it's going to be. He pulled out a notebook and began to write. Names, dates, connections. The outline of something that would eventually become justice. Or vengeance. At this point, Nate wasn't particular about the distinction. Chapter 3. The Architect of Ruin. The Blackstone Hotel in Denver was exactly the type of establishment that would appeal to Lawrence Donovan's aesthetic, sleek, modern, with carefully curated rustic elements that rich people found charming. As Nate toured the property with Henry Blackwood, discussing wood types and design concepts, his mind was cataloging every detail for a different purpose. We'd want each piece to tell a story, Blackwood was saying. Our guests come for experiences, not just a place to sleep. I understand completely, Nate replied, his professional mask firmly in place. Each room should feel like a discovery. By the end of the weekend, Nate had secured a contract worth $120,000 for custom furnishings throughout the hotel's executive suites. More importantly, he'd laid the first stone in the foundation of his plan. Back in Riverstone, he made 2 phone calls. The first was to an old contact from his supplier days, a man named Russell Flynn who had connections in the less reputable corners of the industry. The second was to Sam Westfield. Jesus Christ, Nate, where the hell have you been? Sam's voice was equal parts relieved and angry. Everyone's been looking for you. Not everyone, Nate replied coldly. How's Victoria? A pause. Look, man, I don't know what to tell you. She's with someone else now. That designer guy from Chicago. They're not even trying to hide it. And my kids. Another pause. Alex is working at Victoria's company now. Some VP position. Olivia, she seems confused. Asks about you sometimes. Nate absorbed this information like body blows. I need you to do something for me, Sam. No questions asked. Anything, brother. You know that. I need information. Everything you can get on Lawrence Donovan. His background, his finances, his weaknesses. I know you still have contacts from your insurance investigation days. Nate, what are you planning? Just information, Sam. That's all for now. Over the next month, Nate worked 18-hour days, building furniture for the Blackstone contract by day and constructing his revenge by night. Sam's information arrived in encrypted emails, painting a picture of Lawrence Donovan that grew more interesting with each revelation. Lawrence came from old money that had mostly dried up. His design career was respectable, but not stellar. He had a gambling problem he kept carefully hidden and debts to people who didn't advertise in the yellow pages. He'd been married twice before, each ending when a more advantageous opportunity presented itself. Most crucially, Lawrence had a pattern, finding successful businesses with vulnerable ownership structures, worming his way in through personal relationships, then engineering takeovers. Victoria wasn't his first conquest, in business or in love. She was simply the latest. As for Victoria herself, Sam's intelligence was equally revealing. She had moved Lawrence into the house, Nate's house, within weeks of the birthday ambush. She was aggressively rebranding the company, erasing all traces of Nate's influence. And she was liquidating assets at an alarming rate. She's planning to sell everything and move to France with this guy, Sam reported. The rumor is they've already put a deposit on a chateau. Nate completed the Blackstone project 2 weeks ahead of schedule, earning effusive praise from Blackwood and recommendations to his wealthy circle. Commissions began flowing in, including one from a tech billionaire for his Aspen retreat, a project that would put Nate in the orbit of people with serious influence. With his professional resurrection underway, Nate turned his full attention to Phase 2. He rented a small apartment in his old city, using a different name and paying cash. On weekends, he would drive the 4 hours back, don a disguise simple enough to avoid recognition but effective enough to move freely and observe. He watched Victoria and Lawrence at restaurants, photographed them entering hotels for business meetings. He tracked his children's movements, Alex's predictable route from his downtown apartment to the office, Olivia's less structured schedule as she bounced between coffee shops with her laptop. Nate also visited his old suppliers, using his alias and a story about starting a new venture. He asked casual questions about Brenner furniture designs, hearing disturbing answers. Quality's gone downhill since Nate left, one lumber supplier confided. This new guy cares more about how things photograph than how they'll hold up. Victoria's canceled half her standing orders, another reported. Word is they're outsourcing production to Malaysia. Everything his family had pretended to value, craftsmanship, integrity, legacy, was being dismantled for quick profit. The business he'd built from nothing, the reputation he'd crafted with the same care as his furniture, all being fed into a shredder. One rainy Tuesday, Nate sat in his rental car outside his former home, watching Lawrence's Porsche pull into the driveway. Through the streaming windows, he could see Victoria greet him at the door with a kiss. Behind them stood Olivia, smiling weakly. One big happy family. Something broke inside Nate in that moment. The last thread of restraint, of civilized behavior, of the man he'd been raised to be. In its place grew something harder, colder, more calculated. That night, in his sparse apartment, he made the final adjustments to his plan. It would take time. It would require patience. But when it was done, it would be absolute. He opened his laptop and composed an email to Henry Blackwood, accepting a dinner invitation he'd previously declined. Influential people would be there, potential clients, yes, but also individuals with the power and connections Nate would need. As he hit send, his burner phone buzzed with a text from Sam. Alex asking questions about you. Seems worried about something. Says Victoria acting strange too. Nate smiled for the first time in weeks. They should be worried. The architect of their ruin was drawing up the blueprints, and construction was about to begin. Chapter 4, Wolves at the Door. The Aspen project became Nate's masterpiece and his cover. For 3 months, he created furniture of breathtaking beauty for Montgomery Walsh, a tech magnate with a passion for environmental causes and deep pockets. The commission not only replenished Nate's finances but provided access to a world of power and privilege he had only glimpsed before. This is extraordinary work, Walsh said, running his hand along the edge of a conference table Nate had crafted from reclaimed redwood. You've captured exactly what I wanted. I believe in letting the wood speak for itself, Nate replied modestly. You should come to my foundation benefit next month. People need to see your work and meet the man behind it. The invitation was exactly what Nate had hoped for. Walsh's annual charity gala attracted the type of people who could make or break fortunes with a phone call. Meanwhile, the situation back home was evolving rapidly. Through Sam's intelligence network, Nate learned that Victoria and Lawrence had accelerated their plans. The business was now operating at a fraction of its former capacity, with orders being fulfilled by overseas manufacturers while the original workshops stood empty. They've listed the commercial properties with a realtor, Sam reported. And there's talk about the house going on the market soon. More disturbing was news about his children. Alex had become Lawrence's right-hand man, handling the legal aspects of dismantling what remained of Nate's legacy. Olivia seemed less enthusiastic but was still complicit, creating the rebranding materials that would erase the last traces of her father's influence. And something else, Sam added hesitantly. They've been trying to access your personal accounts, the ones Victoria didn't know about. Nate had expected this. Before disappearing, he had transferred most of his personal savings to new accounts under a holding company established in Wyoming. The trail was deliberately complex, designed to frustrate anyone trying to follow it. Let them try, Nate said coldly. They'll find nothing but dust. The next phase required careful timing. Using contacts provided by Montgomery Walsh, Nate arranged a meeting with Gregory Hayes, a venture capitalist known for aggressive acquisitions in the luxury goods market. I've been following the decline of Brenner Furniture Designs with interest, Hayes said over lunch at his private club. Shame to see such craftsmanship diluted. The current management seems focused on short-term gains, Nate replied, maintaining the fiction that he was simply an interested industry observer. They're vulnerable. To the right offer, perhaps, Hayes mused. Or the right pressure. A week later, Hayes's firm began quietly purchasing supplier contracts and outstanding debts connected to Brenner Furniture Designs. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger alarms, but preparing the noose that would eventually tighten. As autumn arrived, Nate attended Walsh's gala in a tailored suit that revealed his physical transformation. Months of manual labor combined with a ruthless exercise regimen had hardened his body, while his neatly trimmed beard and longer hair changed his appearance enough to provide a shield of unfamiliarity. The event was held at a historic hotel in Chicago, Lawrence Donovan's home territory. The risk of recognition existed, but Nate calculated it as acceptable. He needed to be seen in these circles for his plan to work. Midway through the evening, as he was discussing sustainable forestry with an environmental journalist, Nate spotted a familiar face across the room. Lawrence Donovan, working the crowd with his trademark charm. Beside him stood a woman who was not Victoria, younger, sleeker, hanging on his every word. Nate excused himself and moved to a position where he could observe without being obvious. Lawrence was clearly on the hunt again, laying groundwork while still entangled with Victoria, the predator seeking his next victim. Using his phone, Nate discreetly photographed the interaction. He identified the woman through social media, Renee Burroughs, heiress to a furniture retail fortune. Lawrence was playing a larger game than Victoria realized. The next morning, Nate placed a call to Russell Flynn, his connection to the shadier side of the industry. I need someone professional, discreet, for surveillance only at this stage. I know just the guy, Flynn responded. Former military intelligence. Works private now. Clean record, dirty skill set. The operative, who identified himself only as Miller, began shadowing Lawrence the following week, documenting his movements, his meetings, his indiscretions. The evidence accumulated. Lawrence was systematically betraying Victoria professionally and personally, setting her up to take the fall when the business inevitably collapsed. Nate's next move targeted his son directly. Using information from Miller's surveillance, he discovered that Alex had been cutting corners on regulatory compliance to save costs, particularly regarding the imported furniture that had replaced Nate's handcrafted pieces. Through an anonymous email account, Nate sent a detailed tip to OSHA and the Consumer Product Safety Commission, highlighting potential violations. He included just enough verifiable information to trigger an investigation. 3 days later, inspectors arrived at Brenner Furniture's showroom. The resulting fines were substantial, but the damage to the company's reputation was worse. Several high-profile clients canceled orders. The press began asking questions. Victoria called an emergency meeting, which Miller managed to record. The resulting audio revealed the fractures in their alliance. This is your responsibility, Alex. Victoria's voice, shrill with panic. You assured me the paperwork was in order. Don't put this on me, Alex shot back. Lawrence is the one who insisted on using those suppliers. I told you they were sketchy. Both of you need to calm down, Lawrence interjected smoothly. This is a minor setback. We adjust and move forward. Minor? They're talking about a recall, Lawrence. Do you have any idea what that would cost us? Victoria's voice cracked with stress. Us? There is no us in business, Victoria. There's only who survives and who doesn't. Lawrence's tone had hardened, the mask slipping. Nate listened to the recording twice, satisfaction coursing through him. The first cracks were appearing. Now it was time to apply real pressure. Through Gregory Hayes, he arranged for a series of suppliers to suddenly demand payment in full for outstanding invoices. Simultaneously, several of the company's loans, now controlled by Hayes's firm, were called due because of covenant violations triggered by the regulatory problems. Within weeks, Brenner Furniture Designs was facing a cash crisis. Lawrence suggested selling the house to cover the shortfall. Victoria reluctantly agreed. The final touch was a piece of bait Nate knew Lawrence couldn't resist. He had Hayes approach Lawrence directly with a proposal, help facilitate a hostile takeover of what remained of the company, and receive a generous compensation package plus a senior position in the new structure. Victoria would be left with nothing. As Miller's surveillance confirmed, Lawrence took the meeting and accepted the offer without hesitation. The wolves were now circling, and Victoria had no idea she was being hunted by the pack leader she had invited into her home. Chapter 5. The First Domino. The for sale sign appeared in front of the Brenner home on a crisp October morning. Nate watched from across the street as the real estate agent hammered it into the lawn, the same lawn where he had taught his children to ride bikes, where summer barbecues had stretched into evening, where he had once believed himself happy. Victoria emerged briefly to speak with the agent, her face drawn and tired. She had aged in the months since Nate's departure, new lines around her mouth, a certain dullness to her once vibrant hair. The betrayal business was apparently taking its toll. That evening, Nate activated the next phase of his plan. Using evidence gathered by Miller, he created a dossier on Lawrence's activities, his meetings with Hayes, his affair with Renee Burroughs, his systematic dismantling of the company's assets. He sent copies to Victoria, Alex, and Olivia from an anonymous email address, with a simple message: "Do you know who you're really in business with?" The reaction was swift and messy. Victoria confronted Lawrence that same night. Miller's audio surveillance captured the explosive argument. "You're working with Hayes behind my back? Planning to sell me out?" Victoria's voice trembled with rage. "Don't be dramatic," Lawrence countered, his tone dismissive. "I'm exploring options for when this ship inevitably sinks. You should be thanking me for having a backup plan." "And Renee Burroughs? Is she part of your backup plan too?" A pause. "Who you've been talking to? This is ridiculous." "I've seen the photos, Lawrence." "How long have you been seeing her?" "The whole time you've been with me." The argument escalated, culminating in Victoria throwing Lawrence out of the house. But Nate knew it wouldn't last. Victoria had invested too much in their partnership, both personal and professional, to walk away completely. She would forgive him, as she always forgave those who hurt her. Except Nate, apparently. The next day, Nate made his first direct move. He called Olivia from a new number. She answered on the second ring. "Hello. Olivia. It's your father." Silence, then a choked sob. "Dad? Oh my God, where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Dad, you have to come home. Everything's falling apart. Mom and Lawrence are fighting. The business is in trouble. And..." "I know," Nate interrupted. "I know everything, Olivia. I'm calling because I think it's time you decided which side you're really on." "What do you mean?" "You helped them ambush me. You stood there and watched while they tried to destroy me. Now you're seeing who they really are. So I'm giving you a choice." He outlined what he knew about the company's situation, about Lawrence's true intentions, about the trap that was closing around them all. He explained that he was in a position to either accelerate their downfall or offer a lifeline, but only to those who deserved it. "Mom says you abandoned us," Olivia said quietly, "that you ran away when things got hard." Nate laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Is that what she says? Interesting perspective from someone who served me divorce papers at my birthday party." "I'm sorry about that," Olivia whispered. "It was Alex's idea. He said it would be cleaner that way, and you went along with it. Just like you're going along with all of this." "I didn't know what else to do." "Alex said you'd been cheating Mom out of her share of the business for years. Lawrence said you were planning to sell everything and retire without us." The lies stunned Nate into momentary silence. Then cold fury washed through him. "And you believed them, without ever asking me." "Dad, please. I'm not interested in excuses, Olivia. I'm interested in actions. If you want to save yourself from what's coming, prove it. I need information, documents from the company's servers. Records of the transactions Lawrence has been hiding from your mother. You want me to spy for you?" Olivia sounded horrified. "I want you to choose a side before it's too late to choose at all." After a long silence, Olivia agreed to think about it. Nate ended the call knowing he had planted the seed. Whether it would grow remained to be seen. Meanwhile, Lawrence had indeed reconciled with Victoria, just as Nate predicted. His smooth talking had convinced her that the meetings with Hayes were merely intelligence gathering, and that Renee was pursuing him, not the other way around. Victoria, desperate to believe him, accepted these explanations. But the company's problems couldn't be explained away. The regulatory fines had triggered a clause in their bank loans, accelerating payment schedules. Orders were being canceled as word spread about quality issues. And now the house wasn't selling. Potential buyers mysteriously backing out after initial interest. What Victoria and Lawrence didn't know was that Nate had arranged for Hayes to quietly approach each serious buyer, sharing concerning information about neighborhood crime trends and planned construction that would impact property values. All fabricated, all effective. 2 weeks after his call to Olivia, Nate received an encrypted email containing exactly what he'd asked for. Internal documents showing Lawrence's systematic looting of the company's remaining assets. Olivia had made her choice. Nate forwarded key documents to the company's minority shareholders, former employees to whom he had given small ownership stakes over the years. People who had remained quiet during the takeover, but who now had evidence of malfeasance. The shareholders called an emergency board meeting, demanding explanations. Lawrence attempted to charm his way through, but the evidence was too explicit. The board voted to engage forensic accountants and legal counsel to investigate. That evening, Lawrence withdrew $50,000 from his personal account and booked a flight to Zurich. He was running, but Nate wasn't finished with him yet. Through Miller, Nate ensured that Lawrence's passport was flagged at the airport, not enough to prevent travel, but enough to cause delays and questioning. By the time Lawrence was cleared to board, he had missed his flight and was visibly shaken. As he left the airport, he received a text message from an unknown number. Running won't help. There's nowhere you can go that I can't find you. For the first time, Lawrence Donovan felt the cold touch of fear. Someone was orchestrating his downfall, and he had no idea who it was. Back at the house, Victoria was facing her own crisis. The bank had called their home equity loan due to the company's financial troubles. Without Lawrence's income, he had stopped returning her calls. She couldn't make the payments. Foreclosure loomed. Alex, panicking as his own role in the financial mismanagement came under scrutiny, began looking for someone to blame. He settled on his sister. "You must have given those documents to the shareholders," he accused during a heated argument at the house. "You've ruined everything." "Me? You and Lawrence are the ones who've been cooking the books." Olivia shot back. "Dad built this company from nothing, and you two destroyed it in less than a year. Dad abandoned us. He walked out and disappeared when we needed him most. After you humiliated him on his birthday. After you stole his company and threw him out of his own house." Victoria, listening from the doorway, felt the foundations of her carefully constructed narrative crumbling. The children were turning on each other. Lawrence had vanished. The business was imploding. And somewhere out there, Nate was watching it all unfold. As if summoned by her thoughts, her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "The first domino has fallen. The rest will follow." Victoria sank to her knees, finally understanding. Nate wasn't gone. He had been here all along, hidden in the shadows, methodically dismantling everything she had tried to build on the ruins of their marriage. "What have I done?" she whispered to the empty room. Chapter 6. The Spider's Web. "I understand you've hit a rough patch." Gregory Hayes's voice was professionally sympathetic as he sat across from Victoria in what remained of the Brenner furniture showroom. The space, once filled with Nate's handcrafted pieces, now displayed mass-produced imitations that weren't selling. "That's putting it mildly," Victoria replied, exhaustion evident in every line of her face. "Lawrence has disappeared with what was left in our accounts. The bank is foreclosing on the house. And now the shareholders are talking about a lawsuit." Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "Difficult situation, but not unsalvageable." "What do you mean?" "My firm specializes in restructuring troubled companies. We could offer you a lifeline. Not a generous one, I'm afraid, given the circumstances, but enough to clear your personal debts." Victoria leaned forward. "I'm listening." Hayes outlined a proposal. His firm would acquire Brenner Furniture Designs at a deeply discounted price, assume its liabilities, and retain Victoria as a consultant for 1 year. She would lose control and most of her equity, but would avoid personal bankruptcy. "It's the best offer you're likely to get," Hayes concluded. "I suggest you consider it carefully." After he left, Victoria called Alex to discuss the proposal. He was predictably furious. "You can't sell to Hayes. He's a corporate raider. He'll dismantle everything and sell it for parts." "We don't have a choice, Alex. We're out of options." "What about the investors Lawrence was courting? The ones in Dubai? They've gone silent." "Everyone has." What Victoria didn't know What Nate had carefully ensured she wouldn't know was that his web extended far beyond Hayes. The investors from Dubai had been contacted through Miller's connections and warned about the company's precarious situation. Every potential lifeline had been systematically cut. Meanwhile, Nate continued building his new venture in Riverstone. Brenner Legacy Woodworks was developing a reputation for exceptional quality and innovative design. The wait list for his pieces now stretched 6 months, and he employed 5 local craftspeople to help meet demand. His cabin had been replaced by a modest but beautiful home on the river, built partly with his own hands. To anyone observing, he appeared to be a man who had successfully reinvented himself after some unnamed setback. No one in Riverstone knew the full truth of his past or the scope of his ongoing vengeance. No one except Marissa Calloway, the photographer he'd met at the bar that first night. She had returned to Riverstone for an assignment and sought him out, curious about how the broken man she'd encountered had fared. Their friendship had evolved, not into romance. Nate wasn't capable of that kind of trust yet, but into something equally valuable, genuine understanding. "You're different," she observed one evening as they sat on his deck, watching the river flow past. "Stronger, but harder too. I had to become someone else to survive," Nate admitted. "The man I was, he was too trusting, too willing to believe in the goodness of others." "And the new Nate? What does he believe in?" "Justice," he said simply. "Consequences." Marissa studied him. "There's more to your story than starting over after a bad divorce." "There is," Nate agreed. "But it's not a story I'm ready to tell." She nodded, respecting his boundary. "Well, when you are ready, I'm a good listener." That night, after Marissa left, Nate received a call from Sam. "Victoria's agreed to sell to Hayes," Sam reported. "She's signing the papers tomorrow." "And Alex?" "Furious. Threatening legal action, though I don't see what grounds he has. He's been calling around, trying to find a competing offer, but nobody's biting." "Olivia?" "She moved out last week. Got an apartment downtown. Word is she and Alex aren't speaking." Nate absorbed this information with grim satisfaction. The family that had united against him was now fracturing under pressure. But his plan wasn't complete. Not yet. The next phase required careful timing. As Victoria signed away the company to Hayes, Nate was meeting with a different kind of investor, Damian Reed, a former client with connections to law enforcement. "I appreciate you bringing this to me directly," Reed said, reviewing the documents Nate had provided. Evidence of Alex's regulatory violations and Lawrence's financial manipulations. This level of fraud would typically trigger a federal investigation. "That's exactly what I'm hoping to avoid," Nate replied smoothly. "These are serious, but ultimately fixable problems. What I'm proposing is rehabilitation rather than punishment." Reed raised an eyebrow. Unusual perspective for someone who was victimized by these actions. "I'm a builder by nature, not a destroyer," Nate said, the lie coming easily. "But I need leverage to ensure cooperation." What Nate proposed was elegant in its simplicity. Reed's investment group would acquire the company from Hayes, who was, of course, working with Nate all along, at a modest profit. They would restructure it around the original vision of quality craftsmanship, with Nate returning as chief designer. Alex would be offered immunity from prosecution in exchange for his shares and his resignation. Lawrence, when located, would face the full consequences of his actions. No deals, no mercy. "And Victoria?" Reed asked. "She retains a small stake. Enough to live on, not enough to interfere." Reed studied Nate thoughtfully. "This isn't just business for you." "It never was," Nate acknowledged. "But revenge without purpose is empty. I'm reclaiming what's mine while ensuring those responsible face appropriate consequences." The plan was set in motion. Hayes informed Victoria that he had received a better offer and was selling the company to Reed's group. She was welcome to retain her consultant position under the new ownership. "Who are these people?" Victoria demanded. "I've never heard of them." "New money," Hayes replied vaguely. "But they seem committed to preserving the brand's heritage." The final piece fell into place 3 days later when Lawrence Donovan was located in a Montreal hotel, attempting to establish a new identity. Miller's operatives had been tracking him since his airport detention, allowing him the illusion of escape while cataloging every desperate move. Lawrence was presented with 2 options: return voluntarily to face charges with the possibility of a plea deal, or be forcibly extradited with the full weight of prosecution. He chose the former, unaware that no deal would actually be offered once he returned. As Lawrence was escorted back across the border by federal agents, Nate received the news with cold satisfaction. The man who had plotted to steal his life was about to lose his own freedom. That evening, Nate sat in his workshop in Riverstone, running his hands over the walnut desk he was creating for his new office at Brenner Legacy, soon to be merged with the restructured Brenner Furniture Designs. The wood was warm under his fingers, alive with possibility. His phone buzzed with a text from Sam. "It's done. The feds picked up Lawrence today. Victoria's been questioned as a person of interest. Alex is lawyering up. It's all coming apart just like you planned." Nate set down his phone and picked up his tools. The spider at the center of the web. He had only to wait while his prey thrashed in the silken threads he had so carefully spun. Chapter 7. Ghosts from the Past. The boardroom of Brenner Legacy Designs fell silent as Nate Brenner entered. 14 months after being humiliated at his own birthday party, he walked confidently to the head of the table and took his seat, not as a returning exile, but as the majority shareholder and executive chairman of the newly consolidated company. Around the table sat the board members, Damian Reed and his partners, Gregory Hayes, Sam Westfield, and two master craftsmen from Nate's Riverstone workshop. At the far end, looking small and uncertain, sat Victoria. "Thank you all for coming," Nate began, his voice steady and controlled. "Today marks a new chapter for this company and for everyone associated with it." He outlined the restructuring plan, the return to handcrafted quality, the emphasis on sustainable materials, the apprenticeship program to train new woodworkers. He detailed the financial projections, the marketing strategy, the path to rebuilding the brand's damaged reputation. Throughout his presentation, Victoria stared at him with a complex mixture of emotions: shock, anger, and something that might have been respect. She had aged a decade in a year, her confident poise replaced by a wary fragility. When Nate finished, Reed spoke first. "I think the direction is sound. We're prepared to move forward with the full investment package as discussed." Hayes nodded his agreement. "The market research supports your approach. The premium furniture sector has actually grown despite economic headwinds." One by one, the board members voiced their approval. Finally, only Victoria remained silent. "Victoria," Nate said, meeting her eyes directly for the first time, "you retain a 5% stake in the company. You're entitled to an opinion." She straightened in her chair. "Why are you doing this, Nate? Why not just destroy us completely? You clearly could have." "Because destruction is easy," he replied. "Building something lasting is the real challenge." After the meeting adjourned, Victoria approached him in the hallway. "We need to talk." Privately, they moved to Nate's new office, formerly Lawrence's, redesigned to remove all traces of its previous occupant. Victoria took in the changes, noting the furniture Nate had crafted himself, the absence of Lawrence's pretentious art. "You orchestrated all of this," she said, not a question but a statement. "From the moment you walked out." "Yes. The regulatory investigations, the loan recalls, the buyers backing out of the house purchase. That was all you?" "I had help," Nate acknowledged. "But yes, the plan was mine." Victoria shook her head in disbelief. "I never thought you had it in you. This level of calculation. You taught me a valuable lesson, Victoria. Never underestimate what someone is capable of when everything is taken from them." She flinched at his cold tone. "What happens now? To Alex? To Olivia?" "Olivia made her choice when she sent me the documents proving Lawrence's fraud. She has a position waiting for her in the company if she wants it." "And Alex?" Nate's expression hardened. "Alex faces consequences. The evidence of his regulatory violations has been provided to the authorities. He'll likely avoid prison due to his cooperation, but his law career is over." "He's your son, Nate." "No," Nate replied, his voice like ice. "He surrendered that privilege when he called me a loser and laughed in my face. When he helped steal my life's work and throw me out of my own home." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "And me? What's my punishment?" "You'll live with 5% of what could have been yours. You'll watch from the sidelines as I rebuild what you tried to destroy. You'll never again have control or influence over anything that matters to me." His voice dropped lower. "And you'll know, every day for the rest of your life, that you had something real and threw it away for a con man who abandoned you the moment things got difficult." Victoria wiped her tears with shaking hands. I made a terrible mistake, Nate. The worst mistake of my life. Yes, he agreed without emotion. You did. After she left, Nate stood at the window of his office, looking out at the city. In his reflection, he saw not the man he had been, trusting, generous, forgiving, but the man he had become out of necessity. Harder, colder, more powerful. He felt no triumph, no joy in Victoria's tears, only a grim satisfaction that justice, as he defined it, was being served. That evening, he met Olivia at a quiet restaurant downtown. She arrived looking nervous, her eyes darting around as if expecting an ambush. Relax, Nate said as she slid into the booth. This isn't another birthday surprise. She winced at the reference. I deserve that. You deserve a lot worse, Nate replied evenly. But you also took a risk to help me when it mattered. That counts for something. They ordered drinks, the silence between them heavy with unspoken recriminations and regrets. Why did you do it? Nate finally asked. Stand with them against me? Olivia stared into her glass. Mom and Alex, they were so convincing. They said you'd been planning to sell the company behind Mom's back, that you'd hidden money offshore, that all those business trips were actually meetings with buyers. And you believed that? Without ever asking me. I was confused and scared. Lawrence kept saying how much better the company would be under their management, how we'd all be taken care of. She looked up, her eyes wet. I was weak, Dad. I wanted to believe them because it was easier than standing against them. Nate studied his daughter, seeing both the child he had raised and the flawed adult she had become. The company is being restructured. There's a place for you in the new organization if you want it. In the design department, not management. After everything I did, you'd still give me a chance? One chance, he clarified. Not because you deserve it, but because I choose to offer it. That's the difference between us, Olivia. I make my own choices. I don't let others make them for me. She nodded, understanding the rebuke in his words. What about Alex? Alex made his choices too. He's facing the consequences. He's your son. He stopped being my son the moment he called me a loser and laughed while throwing me out of my home. Nate's voice remained steady, but his eyes hardened. Family isn't just shared DNA, Olivia. It's loyalty, trust, respect. Alex betrayed all of that. As they parted, Olivia hesitated, then asked, Will you ever forgive any of us? Nate looked at her for a long moment. I don't know if forgiveness is something I'm capable of anymore, but I can offer you a path forward. That's all I have to give. Later that night, as Nate drove back to his temporary apartment, his phone rang. Sam's voice was urgent on the other end. Lawrence made bail somehow, and he's not at his approved address. Where is he? That's the thing, nobody knows. But he made some threats when he was released. Said he wasn't going down alone. Nate felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn night. Lawrence was dangerous before, but Lawrence with nothing left to lose was something else entirely. Increase security at all properties, Nate instructed, and put someone on Victoria and Olivia, just in case. The ghost from his past wasn't finished haunting them yet. But then, neither was Nate. Chapter 8, Scorched Earth. The phone calls began at midnight. Victoria was first, her terrified voice leaving a message on Nate's voicemail as he drove across town. He was here, Nate. Lawrence was in the house when I got home. He's taken everything. All the jewelry, cash, even my passport. He said it's your fault, that he's going to make you pay. Please, I think he's lost his mind. Next came Olivia, equally panicked. Dad, someone broke into my apartment. My laptop's gone, and there's a message on my bathroom mirror written in what looks like blood. It says, ask your father what happens to traitors. Dad, I'm scared. What's going on? By the time Nate reached Victoria's condo, a modest two-bedroom she'd downgraded to after losing the house, police were already there. She sat huddled under a blanket, giving her statement to an officer while crime scene technicians dusted for prints. She looked up when Nate entered, relief washing over her face despite everything between them. You came. Of course I came, he replied, surveying the ransacked living room. Are you hurt? No, just terrified. He was waiting in the dark. He said, she broke off, shuddering. He said you'd destroyed his life, so he was going to return the favor. The detective in charge approached Nate, introducing himself as Detective Phillips. Mrs. Brenner says you might have information about the suspect's motives. Nate gave him a carefully edited version of recent events, Lawrence's fraud at the company, his flight and subsequent arrest, the the restructuring that had left him out in the cold. He omitted his own orchestration of Lawrence's downfall. So this is revenge, Phillips concluded. Against both of you. Against me primarily, Nate corrected. Victoria and my daughter are just easier targets. After the police left, promising increased patrols and a bolo for Lawrence, Nate called Sam to collect Victoria. Take her to the safe house in Riverstone. Full security. I'm going to get Olivia. Victoria grabbed his arm as he turned to leave. Nate, be careful. The way he talked about you, it was pure hatred. He blames you for everything. Good, Nate said coldly. He should. Across town, Olivia was staying with a friend, too frightened to return to her violated apartment. Nate picked her up and explained the situation during the drive to Riverstone. Lawrence sees himself as the victim in all this, Nate explained. Men like him always do. They can destroy lives without remorse, but when consequences find them, they rage against the injustice of it all. What does he want? Olivia asked, huddled in the passenger seat. To hurt me. And since he can't find me, he's targeting what he believes I care about. Do you? Olivia asked quietly. Care about us still? Nate kept his eyes on the road. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. The safe house was a lakeside cabin owned by Damian Reed, equipped with modern security systems and accessible only by a single road. By dawn, Victoria and Olivia were settled in, with Sam and two of Miller's operatives providing protection. Nate didn't stay. Despite their pleas, he had other plans. Lawrence isn't after you, he told them. He's after me, and I'm done letting him dictate the terms of this conflict. Back in the city, Nate met with Detective Phillips again, this time providing additional information about Lawrence's likely hideouts, his contacts, his habits. He also shared his theory about Lawrence's endgame. He's not running, Nate explained. He could have taken Victoria's passport and valuables and disappeared. But he left a message instead. He wants a confrontation. If you're right, you need protection too, Phillips warned. I appreciate the concern, Nate replied. But I've been preparing for this moment longer than he has. After leaving the police station, Nate drove to a storage facility on the outskirts of town. The unit was registered under a name Lawrence would never connect to him. Inside was everything he needed for the final act of this long drama. Meanwhile, Lawrence Donovan was indeed planning his grand revenge. Holed up in an abandoned hunting cabin owned by a gambling acquaintance, he was methodically documenting everything he knew about the conspiracy against him. In his mind, warped by rage and humiliation, Nate had become an all-powerful puppet master who had orchestrated his destruction out of petty jealousy. The truth, that Lawrence had brought this on himself through his own greed and betrayal, was inconvenient to this narrative and therefore discarded. What Lawrence didn't realize was that the cabin wasn't as secure as he believed. Miller's surveillance had identified it days earlier as a potential hideout, and miniature cameras had been installed during Lawrence's brief incarceration. Nate watched the feed on his laptop, studying his enemy's movements, his routines, his vulnerabilities. On the third night, Lawrence made a call to a particularly unsavory associate, a man known for solving problems permanently for the right price. Nate recognized the implicit threat immediately and decided the time for waiting was over. The next morning, Lawrence returned from a supply run to find someone sitting in the cabin's single armchair. A man with a neatly trimmed beard and cold eyes that reflected no light. Hello, Lawrence, Nate said quietly. I believe we're overdue for a conversation. Lawrence froze, then lunged for the handgun he'd left on the kitchenette counter. Before he could reach it, Nate's voice stopped him. I wouldn't. The cabin is surrounded, and that gun isn't loaded anyway. I took the liberty of removing the ammunition while you were out. Lawrence straightened, his expression shifting from fear to a brittle bravado. Come to finish what you started? Going to kill me and make it look like an accident. If I wanted you dead, we wouldn't be talking, Nate replied evenly. I'm here to offer you a choice. He laid out the options. Lawrence could surrender peacefully to the authorities, testify against the remaining conspirators in his financial schemes, and serve his time. In exchange, Nate would ensure he was sent to a minimum security facility and received certain privileges. Or he could continue his current path, which would inevitably end with him either dead or facing federal charges that would keep him imprisoned for decades. Why would you offer me anything? Lawrence asked suspiciously. You've destroyed everything I had. No, Lawrence. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't take anyone else down with you. Nate leaned forward. And I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it to close this chapter completely. So magnanimous, Lawrence sneered. The great Nate Brenner, so above it all. You know what your problem was? You never understood power. You had it, but you didn't know how to use it. Your wife saw that weakness in you. Your son too. And yet here we are, Nate observed coldly. You, hiding in a cabin with nothing. Me, holding your future in my hands. Seems I learned about power just fine. Lawrence's facade cracked. You think this is over? It's never over. I'll find a way to hurt you, even from prison. Everyone has weaknesses, Nate. Even you. That's where you're wrong. Nate stood, towering over the diminished man before him. My weakness died the night my family betrayed me. What's left isn't vulnerable to anything you can do. He walked to the door, then turned back. You have until sundown to decide. After that, the choice will be made for you. Outside, Miller waited by the car. He's unstable, the operative observed. Unpredictable. Yes, Nate agreed. That's why we're not really giving him a choice. By nightfall, Lawrence had made no contact. As Nate had predicted, his pride wouldn't allow him to surrender, even when it was clearly the rational option. Miller's team moved in quietly, tranquilizing Lawrence before he could react. By morning, he was in federal custody, the evidence of his financial crimes supplemented by new charges of breaking bail, burglary, and making terroristic threats. No deals were offered. No leniency granted. Lawrence Donovan would serve his full sentence in a maximum security facility, surrounded by criminals far more dangerous than the white-collar fraudsters he had expected to join. Nate watched the news of Lawrence's capture from his office at Brenner Legacy, feeling not satisfaction but a hollow finality. Another chapter closed, another enemy neutralized. That afternoon, he called Victoria and Olivia to inform them they could return home safely. Victoria asked if he would join them for dinner, a peace offering of sorts. I appreciate the invitation, Nate replied formally. But I have other commitments. Those commitments included a meeting with his lawyers to finalize one last piece of business: the complete legal separation of Victoria from any remnants of their shared past. The divorce, delayed by Lawrence's schemes and legal complications, would finally be absolute. As he signed the papers, Nate felt the last threads of his old life severing. The man who had celebrated birthdays with family, who had believed in second chances and forgiveness, was gone forever. In his place stood someone harder, colder, more solitary, but also more powerful and clear-eyed about human nature. It was, he decided, an acceptable trade. Chapter 9, From the Ashes. 1 year later, Nate stood at the edge of his property in Riverstone, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The house he had built with his own hands gleamed in the golden light, not as large as his former home, but more authentic, more truly his. Brenner Legacy Designs had not only recovered but thrived beyond all projections. The return to handcrafted quality, combined with Nate's reputation for uncompromising standards, had attracted a clientele willing to pay premium prices and wait months for delivery. The company now employed 30 craftspeople across 3 workshops, with an apprenticeship program that had become the envy of the industry. Marissa Calloway emerged from the house, 2 glasses of bourbon in hand. Their friendship had evolved into something more over the past months. Not the blind trust of his first marriage, but a wary partnership between 2 people who had learned life's harder lessons. Sam called, she said, handing him a glass. The sale of the Chicago showroom went through. Over asking price. Nate nodded. The final piece of the old company, liquidated to fund expansion in more promising markets. He also mentioned that Victoria's moved to Arizona, taking a teaching position at some design school. Good for her, Nate said without inflection. Marissa studied him. You really don't care, do you? I care that she's no longer my problem. He sipped his bourbon. That's enough. Inside, Nate's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. First collection launching next month. Still want to come see it. Olivia had surprised everyone with her resilience. After the Lawrence affair, she had thrown herself into rebuilding her career, developing a line of furniture that combined her father's craftsmanship with her own modern aesthetic. She operated independently, but used Brenner Legacy's manufacturing capabilities through a licensing arrangement Nate had approved. Their relationship remained professional, cautiously cordial. Not the easy affection of the past, but not the cold estrangement he maintained with Alex and Victoria either. Alex had indeed avoided prison, but his legal career was finished. Last Nate heard, he was working in real estate in Florida, far from the corridors of power he had once aspired to walk. They had not spoken since the final confrontation, and Nate had no desire to change that. Lawrence Donovan had fared worst of all. 6 months into his sentence, he had been severely beaten by other inmates. Apparently, he had tried to run the same manipulative games in prison that had failed him on the outside. He survived, but would walk with a permanent limp. Nate had received this news with indifference. "Penny for your thoughts," Marissa said, interrupting his reflection. "Just taking inventory," Nate replied, "assessing where things stand." "And what's the verdict?" He looked around at the life he had built from the ashes of betrayal. The thriving business, the home that was truly his own, the woman beside him who accepted him as he was, not as she wished him to be. "I have everything I need," he said simply, "and nothing I don't." Later that evening, as they sat by the fire pit overlooking the river, Marissa asked the question she had been circling for months. "Do you ever think about forgiving them? Not for their sake, but for yours." Nate stared into the flames. "Forgiveness is overrated," he said finally. "Some betrayals cut too deep. Some actions have consequences that can't be undone with words. So that's it. No redemption possible. They made their choices, just as I made mine." He turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "I'm not angry anymore, if that's what you're asking. I don't lie awake plotting further revenge. But forgiveness implies the possibility of reconciliation, of return. There's nothing to return to. The man who left that birthday party, he isn't the same man sitting here now," Marissa observed. "No," Nate agreed. "He's not. That man died that night. What rose from his ashes is stronger, wiser, and far less forgiving." The next morning, Nate received a call from his lawyer. The final paperwork had come through. Victoria had signed off on the last joint property, a vacation cabin in Colorado that Nate had forgotten they even owned. Everything was now officially, irrevocably settled. As he hung up, Nate felt a curious lightness. Not happiness exactly, but the completion of a cycle. The ledger was balanced. Accounts settled. Justice, as he defined it, had been served. He walked to his workshop where a half-finished dining table waited, his first personal project in months. Running his hands over the tiger maple surface, he felt the wood's warmth, its potential. Unlike people, wood never betrayed you. It revealed its true nature from the beginning, its strengths and flaws, its beauty and limitations, all plainly visible to those who knew how to look. Picking up his tools, Nate began to work, shaping something new from raw material. The past was finally, truly behind him. The future, this future he had fought for and built with his own hands, stretched before him, uncompromised by false promises or misplaced trust. It was, he decided, enough. More than enough. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.